Okay. There for a moment, I wasn't sure I could get my composure. Or prayer was making me cry. Um, but uh, this morning, I wanted to talk to us about our identity, who we are. I hear this from not only transgenders, but people from all walks of life. When they're lost and they're searching and they're always looking for identity, we are all desperate to figure out who we are. And we, as Christians, need to be telling people who they are because of who God says they are. Because otherwise, people are never going to find it looking in themselves. But I do want to. Oh, hang on. Okay, we'll try this. Okay, I do want to warn you that there is some disturbing content here. It's not too graphic, but I've tried to tone it down as much as I can. But I do want to warn you about what's really going on in the culture, because I think a lot of the church is not aware of what's really going on. It is getting extremely dark, and the church has got to wake up and start speaking. And yes, we need to lovingly share in compassion with people one-on-one. We also need to be speaking out about this agenda. Our children are being sacrificed to Moloch, basically, just as they were in the ancient days. It's just instead of through fire, it's through this sexual agenda. I also wanted to tell you about this humility event that we have coming up at Sooner Park. It may be kind of hard to read. It says, "Love is not proud." This is kind of a response to the Pride event. This will be at Sooner Park from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on July 13th. It's sponsored by several area local churches. I'll be speaking along with Dr. Piper and Stephen Black and some others. So come out there and support us. We are already getting a lot of pushback on this. People are threatening to protest and stuff, and I was amazed. Even one of them specifically wants to come out there with her air horn while we're trying to pray specifically. So it's such evil. This really is from Satan. Anybody that tells you that the LGBT agenda is good and loving the church just needs to get on board. This is from the pits of hell. Okay. So I want us to think about identity for a minute. If I told you that I'm a 36-year-old Caucasian woman who's 5'4", that describes me pretty accurately just as far as physically. But what if I told you that I was really a man? Now, in today's culture, a lot of people would say, sure, whatever, you can identify as a man if you want to. But what if I say that I'm identifying as a black man? Is everybody still okay with that? And I remember Abdu Murray first used a similar example. Of course, if you remember him, he is a 6'8" Arab man, so I had to change this a little to fit my description instead of his. But the principle is the same. So what if I say I'm now a 6'3" black man? And you can see as you begin to pile on these characteristics, this is getting less and less likely. But for some reason, when people say that they're a man instead of a woman, a lot of the culture is just saying, okay, whatever you want to identify. But the more this you pile on, the more it's obvious this is not who I am. What if I told you I want to be 6 years old? So now I'm a 6-year-old black boy. So what if now identifying as a dragon? And of course this gets crazy, but I'll show you why I showed you these here in a moment. See, this was me back in the early one there in 2008 and then in 2015. And a lot of the culture really believed that I was a man. I had a job where I was only known as a man, and I believed that was my real identity. But these other ones may have sounded crazy, but there really are people that are claiming to be transracial. Rachel Dolezal was a white woman, but she believed that she was black. I read last night recently that she was... her family had adopted 4 black children, and she began to identify with them. And I don't know if maybe she thought her parents loved them more, or I don't know her motives behind this, but somewhere along the line began to believe that she was supposed to be black. And she ended up being the president of the Spokane chapter of the NAACP. And they didn't even realize she was white for a long time until she was later exposed. She was also teaching African studies at the Eastern Washington University. So she had a lot of people fooled. Martina Big was I don't know if she was a model or she actually aspired originally to be Pamela Anderson or to be like her. She was jealous of her and the big figure and all this. But she took some tanning injections that worked a little too well. They made her extremely dark. And she just embraced it and was like, this is who I really am. But the more she believed it, the more and more delusional she became, and now she truly believes that she is a black woman. She has been baptized into some African religious tribe. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but then she also now has a white husband, and she believes they will have black babies. And so you can see, the more people believe this, and the more they're affirmed in this, it becomes more and more delusional. And eventually, they believe the lie for so long they can't see the truth anymore. Brown University is now allowing students to self-identify as another race. And this is interesting. They did this because of some pushback, because some of the kids weren't being invited to these. They were having these multicultural dinners that were really just for the minority races. So some of the other students started complaining. So now they've allowed the students to self-identify as another race. But remember, we have these scholarship opportunities and all these different things for minority students. So now the question's being raised, well, can they self-identify as Asian or as Hispanic or whatever on their applications and get scholarships? And they've basically been silent on that because they can't answer that. And one thing you'll realize with a lot of these issues, it's fraught with contradiction. And a lot of times questions are a very good way of dealing with these things, because we have to remember that Jesus Christ is the only truth. There's no truth outside him. There's no truth outside the Word of God. And these just have nothing but contradictions. There are also people that are claiming to be trans-age, which is why I mentioned being a 6-year-old boy. This Stephanie was a 54-year-old man at the time. He is now living as if he were a 6-year-old girl, and this couple that is shown in the picture actually took him in and is raising him as if he were their 6-year-old girl. And this couple had a 5-year-old granddaughter living with them at the time, and they would play together and do child things. And the sad part is he admits that he couldn't deny the fact that he was married, he had several children, and he said, "I just don't want to be an adult right now." And so instead of somebody helping him, they're just raising him as if he were their daughter. I think that is extremely sad and just pitiful on the part of these people that they would do that. I mean, this is abuse. This person needed help, obviously. And then Emil Rattlebrand has really made some waves in the media a while back. He's a homosexual man in, I think it's Denmark, I forgot the country, but he wanted to identify as a 45-year-old man instead of a 65-year-old man because he didn't like the fact that when he was on this gay dating app, he didn't get as many likes as some of the other guys did that were younger. And he said, well, if I could identify as a younger man, then I would get more likes. And he really made kind of a stink in the courts because he said, well, if the transgenders can claim they're a different gender, why can't I claim I'm a different age? And he really brought up some valid points. Not that him being a different age is valid, but he brought up a valid point. If we can change one characteristic just arbitrarily, why can't we change another? And so there are also people that are living as trans species. And then the sad thing is these people really do need our compassion. I mentioned when I did my testimony last year, the guy on the right that's where I'm showing the two pictures there, he identifies himself as a dragon. He actually claims to be the dragon lady. He originally lived as transgender. He realized that transgender wasn't fixing his problems, and that wasn't really who he is, so now he's decided to become a dragon. This guy's been through horrible, horrible abuse in his life. Please pray for this man if you think about it. I've forgotten his real name. But he's had almost $70,000 worth of surgeries trying to find his identity. And he needs the gospel. He needs Jesus. So I do want to expose kind of the insanity of all this, but at the same time, we need to remember to be compassionate. And then this is a couple, and you may not be able to read that, but this couple is trying to raise their child as completely non-binary, they call it, which means that they're not male or female. They want the child to decide what gender they are. And the sad thing is, I don't know if you can see their faces. The entire interview, it's like a 5 or 6 minute interview. They have pretty much this expression on their face the entire time. They look so sad and pitiful. And they're talking about how happy their kid's going to be because they're raising them with, none of these gender stereotypes. These people look absolutely miserable. And somehow they think their philosophy is going to bring happiness to their child. But they basically said, we don't want him to have the constraints of gender yet. We want him to explore both sides of the spectrum and then decide for himself when he's older. What we say is, do what you want as long as you're safe. And this is not parenting. This is not even babysitting. It's really just, I don't even know. They're allowing the culture basically to raise their children. A child does not know, what is it? The Bible says that our hearts are desperately wicked. We need to be taught. We need to be taught who we are. We need to be taught what's right and wrong. So this just infuriates me that they're raising their child this way. How many of you ever heard the term non-binary before I said it? Okay, a few of you. Non-binary, like I said, basically means that you're not male or female. People are claiming this. People are claiming there's all kinds of genders now. Facebook, I think at one time was claiming that there were, 50 or 60 different genders. They're just making up all kinds of stuff. God says that he created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. But this is the guy that was, he was the very first legally declared non-binary person in the United States. Because of him, 11 states have changed their laws, and it may be more now, that was at the time, to include non-binary on driver's licenses, on all kinds of other legal documents. But he said, and this was when he was originally living as a female. He said, 3 years into my gender change from male to female, I looked hard into the mirror one day. When I did, the facade of femininity and womanhood crumbled. There is a point where all transgenders at some point will realize this is a lie. You cannot live a lie and expect to find happiness. And you're just constantly reminded this is not who you are. And so he decided to become non-binary, and the media just made a huge sensation out of him. And it was amazing how when he claimed this, he became like the darling of the LGBT community. He got more support. They paid all his court fees and everything to get all this changed for him. But then he eventually said, the truth is that my sex change to non-binary was a medical and scientific fraud. He is now, he's one of the bravest guys I know. He has really stood up to this industry. He has totally come out of this. And in fact, he said that he has now given his life to Christ. And originally he had said he was not religious, and so I started praying for him. And then a couple months later, I saw something he'd posted about giving his life to God, and so I messaged him to find out more, and he said that my story had been a real inspiration to him. So while I was praying, the Lord was using my story to bring him to Christ. But this is what the result of that is, that this is being pushed on little kids. This is a kid named Arlo. I don't even know if it is a girl or a boy. I think it's a girl. But she said, I just came out as non-binary. Here's what that means. And I want you to hear how these identities cause people to become extremely self-centered and narcissistic, because they have to constantly affirm this identity. And just listen to how she's wanting the entire world basically to cave to her feelings and her desires. She said, my name's Arlo and I'm transgender, which means that I don't identify with the gender I was assigned at birth. Not created, but assigned at birth. I'm not a girl, and the thing is, I'm not a boy either. So the word I use to describe my gender is non-binary. Here are some things you need to know to understand who I am. The gender binary is this Western concept that there are only two gender options, male or female. The most important thing to know about the gender binary is that it's kind of made up. Gender identity, one's own internal experience and perception of self. And I actually forgot I meant to put another quote there, basically where she was talking about all the pronouns that people need to use and why this is offensive and that's not, and you need to refer to me this way, and it just went on and on and on. Like people are going to read her she ought to just hand them like a script. Here, this is how you refer to me. But it's sad, and these people really begin to believe this, and they think they're going to find happiness if everybody just around them just affirms who they are. But it leads to nothing but emptiness. We cannot find happiness within ourselves, within our own wicked heart. Now, if you believe you can transition from male to female, at what point do you become female? And this is a point, or something that I really had to wrestle with when I was trying to become a man. Like, what point does this become real? If you put on a dress, if you get a female hairstyle, if you get your name legally changed, even having surgery. Now, I used to think that once I had surgery, I really would be a man. Robert Arquette, I don't know if anybody remembers he was one of the Arquette brothers. He lived as a woman named Alexis, and he actually said that putting on a dress doesn't biologically change anything, nor does a sex change. He said that sex reassignment is physically impossible. All you can do is adopt these superficial characteristics, but the biology will never change. And doctors are saying that. Dr. Barry Starr of Stanford University said no amount of surgery, hormone injections, or anything else will change someone's DNA from a man's to a woman's or vice versa. So these surgeries still do not do anything. And that is the point that I realized after all the years of hormones and everything, after I had my surgery and I realized that this wasn't real and it was devastating. All I had done was change the outer body, or the outer appearance. There are about 37 trillion cells in your body. And think about that in terms of time, because I really couldn't get a good concept of how many 37 trillion was. You know, how long, if you were to think about each one of your cells for 1 second each, and just think about each cell, how long do you think that would take? And if you think about, okay, 100 seconds, that would be less than 2 minutes. But it's exponential, and so after 37 trillion seconds is over 1 million years. That's how many cells are in our body. And so each one of those cells, every single one of those cells contains your sex chromosomes. And no amount of surgery or hormones is ever going to change that. And so your body is just screaming at you all over your body that you are male or female. This is not arbitrary. It's not something we can fix just altering the appearance. It won't change your DNA. How many of you have heard this phrase, your sex is assigned at birth? Did you know that that's what they're teaching little children? In fact, they are now teaching preschoolers in some areas. I think this was out of California, but they're teaching preschoolers that mommy and daddy didn't know what gender you were when you were born, and the doctor just assigned one. And these children that don't understand their bodies yet they said kids have come home crying and they're saying I'm not really a girl, and there's just mass confusion. These kids have got to be taught who they are and why God created them that way. Isaiah 48 says, the grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God shall stand forever. And I've been thinking, yesterday I was thinking about this tug of war that we have in the culture right now. And the way the church has been dealing with this for the last few decades is to give a little. And if we just compromise just a little bit, then we're going to pull them over to our side. But what happens, think about a tug of war. If you remember back to your childhood, how much ground did you gain by giving a little? None. You lose it, yeah, because as soon as you let up a little, they yank you, and they're going to pull you a whole lot further. And we're seeing this in culture. This agenda has been an intentional agenda back since the 50s, maybe even before that, where they have laid out steps that they were going to do to change the culture, to get us to accept homosexuality and transgenderism, and eventually pedophilia. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But we've got to quit wrestling with this. First of all, if we're playing tug of war, we're never going to win. We've got to put, the Bible is an absolute standard that's never going to change. So I say we put a stake in the ground, this metal stake that's not going to move, and say we're not moving, and just say this is the standard. It's not ever going to change. Because if we keep compromising, we're never going to win, because they're not giving in. But eventually, what happens, let's say that we do just tie the rope to this metal stake that's cemented in the ground that's not ever going to move. What's going to happen if they start pulling against it? They're eventually going to get tired, and they will. If we hold our ground, if we continue to tell them what the Bible says. Even last week I was with some street preachers out at the Pride event in St. Louis, and there was a lot of people that were spewing all kinds of hatred, and they were screaming at us and all this, but there were people that were genuinely listening. And so you just never know, and we've got to keep speaking the truth, because the truth will set people free. Here's an example of just the nonsense that's going on. You may not be able to read this. I'll read it to you. This is Jake, that's 8 years old. It's a girl who's transgender from Central Illinois. And this is what his mom wrote, or her mom. I've always liked the analogy that a friend of ours, Hannah, made. She compares being transgender to handedness, and she's talking about being left or right-handed. How do you know you're right-handed or left-handed? No one tells you. You're not born with a mark on your hand telling people which you are. You just know. when you put something in the wrong hand, you then know too. You know it feels wrong, not right. That's how gender is. When a trans person is walking around the world in the gender they're not, they know it feels wrong. They just know. And when they transition, when they live authentically, it's like picking up a pencil in the correct hand. It feels good, it feels natural, organic, and right. But I have a problem with this. She says it's comparing it to handedness, that there's not a mark on your body telling you which you are. That may be true for left or right hand. It is not true for gender. We have a very clear mark. And in fact, I wrote an article that I believe it's on the Stand as well, but on my website called Examining the Evidence, where I talk about how our bodies, our genitalia, are not the result of, or how did I put it? They don't determine gender. It is the evidence of gender. It is the evidence of what God has already put on the inside. So yes, we have a clearly defined mark. We know what gender we are. Here's a Gillette ad recently. This is a girl, a transgender man as they call her, where her dad is showing her how to shave and helping her shave for the first time. And this is being propagandized to our children and to our parents and saying this is the loving approach. You know, look how loving this dad is for helping her daughter or his daughter learn how to shave as a man. This is a little boy this is a really tragic story. If you think to pray for this little boy, his name is James, the one in the center there. He has one brother, and then the other three are a family friend. And this little boy, his mother is trying to transition him to a girl. And they are saying that this is against his will. He is, when he's around his dad and these other little boys, no desire to be a girl. He's not showing any signs of it. But his mother, for whatever reason, I don't know if she thinks it's cool or whatever, but some good family friends have said he has no desire to do this. In fact, Walt Heyer, who's a former transgender, actually met with him and said this kid is not transgender, but his mother is trying to medically transition him, and the courts have sided with her. And they are planning on chemically castrating him later this year. So please pray for this little boy. But this is the reality of what's going on in our society. And the courts are so afraid of the LGBT activists that they are siding with the LGBT in almost every case. The University of Minnesota has this new policy where I was going to read it, but basically it boils down to the fact that they are saying that this LGBT is going to trump everything else. They're saying if you have a roommate now that has been assigned to you that is transgender, so that they are biologically the opposite sex. So say a girl is now rooming with a man that's claiming to be a woman, they're saying they could be kicked out of school for complaining about it. So here's Snapchat. They look like brother and sister. This is actually the same photo, but it's been enhanced with a Snapchat filter that just allows you to see what you would look like as the other gender. And this is such a ploy of Satan. It reminds me of the conversation in the garden. Just look at it. Look how wonderful this is. And these children are, they'll be able to see that and say, wow, I look better. And of course, they're enhancing it with, this is a guy. This is the original photo, but then they've enhanced it with all this airbrushing, and look how beautiful I look, and it's just such a lie of the enemy. But look at the reality of what's going on, and I don't know if you can see this. This is one of those drag queen story hours. They keep claiming they don't have any agenda. They keep claiming that this is all innocent, and they just want to show these kids how we need to be loving and accepting, but they had these, at one of these recent ones, he's laying on the floor and letting these kids crawl all over him. They've already had at least 2 instances they know of where they've had convicted pedophiles at these drag queen story hours. And so, these are not loving. In fact, one lady, I was going to read this. They are now being presented in some schools as well. I didn't realize this until recently. They're not just staying at the library. Drag queen story hour gave my first graders, this is a teacher, a fun and interactive platform to talk and think about social and emotional issues like acceptance, being yourself, and loving who you are. But they are pushing this agenda, and pedophilia is being more and more normalized quickly. Start looking at the headlines. It's really sick what's going on. But I also wanted to mention there's a lady that who is really fighting this agenda now. She and 2 other moms went to one of these to record what was going on, and the police escorted her out because they wouldn't let her even film what was going on. But it's cost her a lot to speak out against this agenda. Her name is Lynn, another one you can pray for. All three of her kids have totally just rejected her and abandoned her, but she is really speaking out about this. And it reminded me of that verse where Christ said, if anyone loves mother or father more than me, or son or daughter more than me, they're not worthy of me. We at some point, yes, we absolutely need to love our children, but we have got to start standing for Christ no matter what it costs, because she's basically lost her entire family fighting this agenda. Because 2 of her kids are transgender, and that's why they hate her so much. Okay, I'm going to play this video clip here. Uh-oh, my sound. Hang on. Shoot. Ah. Well. I didn't think to test it. All right. Well, I wanted to play these video clips for you. Where's Kendall? See? Do you know why the sound's not working? Okay, we'll just go on. Huh? Okay. I wonder if I can. I'm going to try. I had a bunch of video clips. I didn't realize that. I wonder if I can hold the microphone to it. Yeah. Okay, I think that'll work. Okay, yeah. I just got to turn it up. Okay. I wonder if this is still on. Okay.
You have written, we have discussed some seriously crazy stories.
Can you hear it?
Out of the public school. This one might be the worst yet. We have a school administrator in California actually arguing that we need to, and they are, even as we speak, teaching pedophilia to children as just another option for sexual orientation. Give us the story.
You know, this concerned mother asked the assistant superintendent of curricula in the Brea Olinda School District in California why they were teaching children pedophilia and normalizing anal sex. And you would expect the administrator, the assistant superintendent, to say, oh my goodness, that's horrible. Where did you get such an idea? We would never do something like that. But instead, what she says is, well, you know, this is a sexual orientation that has occurred, and so it's, quote, really important to teach the children about this. And they are.
Answer me why you're teaching pedophilia in school to ninth graders.
Teaching what?
Pedophilia, pederosity, right here.
I've explained to you that this is done because we are talking about historical perspectives of how gender relations and different types of sexual orientations have existed in history.
This is not about something occurred and therefore we have to teach it. I mean, if that was the case, we'd be teaching all kinds of things. What it is about is normalizing every type of perversion. And I want people to realize here the implications of this. This is more than just confusing and perverting and sexualizing the children. Under California law, and this is the case in about half of the states now, and they're working on it at the federal law with the Equality Act, discrimination based on sexual orientation is illegal. So if pedophilia is a sexual orientation, do public schools now need to hire pedophiles so that we don't discriminate on their sexual orientation? Do churches need to hire pedophiles so that they don't discriminate based on sexual orientation to run their children's ministries?
We've seen it, haven't we, Alex? That at American public libraries and in public schools, we're inviting transvestites to come to read to our kindergartners who actually have records, twice it happened in Houston, for having molested kids in the past.
This was the inevitable result of this, right? And now in California's fake history textbooks, they're praising this LGBT superhero, Harvey Milk, for being, the first elected openly homosexual activist. Turns out that guy also had a history of raping underage boys, and it is rape, right? The children cannot consent. And some of them went on to kill themselves, and yet they've made him into a superhero in California's textbooks as part of this new law that mandates the positive presentation of homosexuals and their alleged contributions to history.
What they're going to have to do if they continue this, if this goes unchallenged, is they're going to have to teach children that to oppose the sexual advances of adults simply because they're adults is now a kind of bigotry and orientation phobia. That's the next logical thing, to convince kids that if they're not considering sex with older people, then they're being bigots. That's the only place we by definition have to go next.
So that's the reality of where this agenda is going. And this is being normalized more and more every day. Okay, and I've got.
The hardest part of all this was when I didn't transition and I was not happy and it didn't feel right.
So we sought the support of a gender specialist. And so through conversations there, Rebecca came to tell us, no, this is definitely me. I'm a girl. I'm a girl in my head and my heart.
I felt like I was a girl because I liked the color pink and I liked girls' clothes and how they wore their hair and stuff.
Okay, so you realize they are now transitioning this little boy because he said he liked girls' clothes, because he liked the color pink, and he liked the way they wore their hair. Oh, he must really be a girl, so let's transition her. Or him. But this is the reality of what they are doing to our children.
Today, kids as young as 3 are saying they were born the wrong gender.
Are you a boy or a girl?
Boy, because I want to be a boy.
But what do you do when your perfect baby girl wants to be a little boy?
George hates being identified as a twin because he associates being a twin as being a girl.
See, and I think this lady has got this backwards. I don't know if you noticed, but she, this is a girl, hates her twin sister and doesn't like being identified with a twin. And the mother is saying, well, it's because she doesn't like being a girl. But my guess is she wants to be a boy because she hates being a twin, or for whatever reason, maybe doesn't feel like she has her own identity. But transition's not the answer. Okay, this is another really sad one, and this is Desmond Napoles, that they have been parading on all kinds of news networks with all these other transvestites and drag queens. They've had him in a nightclub in New York City where he was dancing as a drag queen, and they were putting money in his costume like as if he was a stripper. And now, I'm going to play this video.
Hi, I'm Desmond is Amazing, and I'm a 10-year-old drag kid from New York City. I love doing drag because you get to express yourself, and there's no boundaries. And if you don't think you look fabulous, you do, because your costumes are always fabulous. Even if your makeup isn't perfect and on point, you still look amazing.
See, I just want us to hear some of the things these kids are saying, and if we will start looking at why they want to do these different things. Many of the kids, like the one before that said he likes the color pink and he likes the way girls wear their hair, and this one saying he loves being a drag queen because there's no boundaries. What kid doesn't like boundaries? But the sad thing is this kid is also autistic. You know, he needs help, and this is not. This is probably giving him a way to express himself. But this is not what he needs. And the mother is horrified now because her son is being, desired by pedophiles. And this Tom O'Carroll, that is a British pedophile rights campaigner, he has been posting about this little boy and another little boy that's also doing drag. He has been convicted of distributing child pornography on a massive scale. In a May blog post for his WordPress site, which is openly and proudly pedophile, O'Carroll declares that Desmond is truly amazing and hot. His post of this on Instagram, this was the really sick thing. His post of this on Instagram has over 4,000 likes. This is another one. This is the other little boy that he's also posted about. They had him on stage posing next to this naked man and talking about how wonderful this is. And so how do we react if we know that a plane is going down and it's getting ready to crash and burn and everybody's just around us is just having a great time and they're enjoying the ride and they don't realize the plane's crashing and we know there's parachutes in the back? Are we just going to jump off and, oh, glad we're safe? And that's kind of how the church, I think, has reacted for a long time. But the plane is going down, and it's getting ready to crash, and we have got to start, even though the people, they may not want to get out of their comfort zone. They may say, hey, I'm watching a movie, leave me alone. But they've got to be warned. We've got to be telling them. And then this was a Pride event that was designed by Teens for Teens, it said. The Teen Pride event was billed as a Pride celebration designed by Teens for Teens. According to the library website, it was suitable for ages 9 to 19 years old. It featured drag queens, all sorts of explicit adult-themed advice, and a raffle for dangerous chest binders for these girls. The lady I mentioned earlier, she was the one that was trying to speak out against this. She was horrified by this chest binder raffle. It raffled off 8 of these to young girls. And these binders cause serious harm, and I can attest to this because I have major back problems because of it. But I didn't realize just how dangerous they are. It can be worse than that. They can lead to broken ribs, which can lead to punctured and collapsed lungs, in addition to all kinds of back problems, overheating, chest pain, shortness of breath, numbness, bad posture, and lightheadedness. But, when these moms tried to speak out against this, they were escorted out by the police. Isaiah 58:1 says, cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgressions. So I just want to encourage us, we've got to start speaking out. I wanted to read you a couple of quotes of some of these people that regret transition. Perry Desmond, I just finished his book recently, and I wanted to put it as a recommended resource that's out of print. So you can buy it on Amazon for $150. I'm going to try and convince them to reprint it. I think it's an amazing book. Somehow the Lord just gave me a copy. I didn't realize it was out of print. I got mine for $15. And then I went back to buy another one for a friend, and they're selling for $150 and up. So anyway, but he said, I found what I'd been looking for all my life. Dresses only covered my masculinity. Makeup only masked it. Silicone only reshaped it. Surgery only mutilated it. Underneath in every cell of my body, the truth was recorded 10 million times in every gene. I was a man. And then Michael, who was sexually abused by his grandfather, this is an excerpt from Trans Life Survivors by Walt Heyer. It's just like a bad dream and it won't go away. You can fantasize and dress like a woman, but you can never be a woman. No, the sex change surgery did not change my gender or sex either. It just made every second of my day unbearable and a living hell. The problem is, as you know, when this disgusting thing consumes your life, you're not open to hearing the truth. All I saw was the websites, videos, and girls in the streets of Bangkok telling me how pretty I was going to be. And that's the reality that I hear over and over and over. People are looking at these images and these videos of other people that are transitioning, often early on in the transition. Oh, look how wonderful they are. It's the same thing back to the Garden of Eden. Satan is always trying to show us, look how wonderful this is going to be. Look how pretty this is. And we begin to believe those lies. This is from Max, also from Trans Life Survivors by Walt Heyer. I wish I had listened to you. I'm only in my mid-20s. I transitioned in my teens and had surgery. I was too young to make a decision. I've sunken into such deep regret. I don't even feel transgender anymore. I feel like my old self. I'm happy with a female appearance, but that's all I really needed. Now, I would say he doesn't need to look like a female either, but even he's regretting the surgery. I feel like I was brainwashed by the transgender agenda and by gender norm expectations. I would do anything to have my genitals back. My feelings were confused, and I thought they would never go away. I'm just a guy who's really in touch with my feminine side. I can't believe what I've done to my life, and I have no choice but to take hormones forever. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm losing my mind. All I would have had to do was discontinue my hormones, and everything would have been all right. I honestly feel 100% normal and okay if only I'd never had that surgery. And then one more. This is Noah, also from the same book. Surgery reminded me that nothing can change me from the male I am. The operating table takes my genitals. That for sure will not make me a female. When I realized the surgery is all cosmetic surgery, then I realized what a hoax it was to suggest or pretend that I was female. So again, I just want to reiterate, it is not loving to affirm that these kids are really this other gender. And I know all of you probably know this, but we just need to remember that even if they're claiming that they feel this way, let's find out why they're feeling that way. Affirm who God made them to be, because studies have shown that if they are affirmed in their natural gender, a lot of them will eventually grow out of it. But if they are affirmed in the gender that they want to be, they will continue down that process. And recent studies showed that 100% of the kids that were allowed to dress that way and identify that as children, 100% of them later wanted to take hormones and get surgeries. So that's where that leads. So thinking that we can just affirm them and make them feel good about it and let them dress that way and identify that way and they'll grow out of it, it's the opposite. Here are two examples of two that had everything that the society says that they wanted. I don't know if you remember the homecoming king that was actually a girl that was crowned a couple of years ago. That was a big deal in the news media. Oh, look how wonderful this is. She had all the affirmation she could ever want. She had an entire community around her. The whole school was supportive. She ended up committing suicide less than a year later. And then the guy on the right was a trans activist. This was also a girl. And she, again, had all the affirmation. She was an activist for this. She also committed suicide. So all this affirmation is not ever going to fix the problem. The problem is internal. They need Jesus as the ultimate answer.
The sex change didn't
hang on.
discomfort. The doctors who are honest will say that the gender dysphoria is always there. And it's because the confusion is, it's not so much, it starts out being about your anatomy, but really what you don't like yourself. There is a benefit in my standing before an audience of young kids in college who are considering this path and saying to them, okay, I'm the real deal. I started living as a woman when I was 20. I've lived 40 years of my life. I've had breast augmentation. I've had genital surgery. I've had 40 years of hormones. All of it has not made my life any better. It's never solved the problem. You break your left leg. You go into a doctor's office, and under the transsexual rule of medical treatment, they say, this is your new normal, and we're going to break your right leg too.
And this is someone who has lived it for 40 years and saying this is not real, this has never fixed anything. And sadly, he's still living that way. I pray he comes to Christ.
The sex change.
So far, he has just resolved to kind of live that way. And that was the point I kind of got to before I came to Christ. It was like, well, this is life, and that's the best it's going to get.
7 years after transitioning to a woman, I started thinking, okay, I've been doing this for 7 years now. My problems should have gone away by now, but they hadn't. And I actually had more problems at that point. Another problem is just trying to pass. Trying to do my hair just right, trying to do my makeup just right, trying to look just right to where people would not be uncomfortable, because you can see when people identify you as being transgendered. I was like, this isn't life. Nothing has really changed. I'm still struggling. I was better off as I was before the surgery, before the hormone treatment. So it was at that point, 5 years after the surgery, thereabouts, that I started to have thoughts about changing back.
And this guy, I thought I had the rest of the video, but this guy ended up going on to, he's now married to a woman. He has come to Christ. He's been set totally free of this. But I just wanted again to hear how none of this ever helped him. He wishes he hadn't had all the surgery and the hormones. He was better off, even though he had some depression before, but this all made it worse. So why do we have these feelings? I mean, whether we've struggled with gender or whatever, think back to a time before you were saved. Some of us, if you're saved as a young child, may not remember. But we all have these questions. Again, I asked this at the beginning, who am I? What is my purpose here? And why am I here? What is the point of life? And I hear this from people that don't know Christ all the time. They're just searching and searching. And we all wish that we were, a star athlete, a famous actress, more popular, stronger, faster, smarter, richer. But it's all empty. All these things that we're pursuing without Christ, without having our identity in who God says we are, it's all empty. But why? Here's just an example. Anthony Bourdain, I don't know how, probably a lot of you recognize that name. He was a world-famous chef, one of the most famous in the world. He hosted 10 different TV shows, including Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown, No Reservations, A Cook's Tour. He produced 7 shows, was a celebrity judge on 5 additional cooking shows. He authored multiple best-selling books and cookbooks and more. He traveled all over the world sampling the world's finest cuisine. He had everything you could want, and yet in Kitchen Confidential, Adventures in the Culinary Underbelly, he said, "Your body's not a temple, it's an amusement park. Enjoy the ride." But let's see where that philosophy got him. And you see, too, that phrase really caught my eye, your body's not a temple. He knows what the Bible says, and he in fact one of his parents was Jewish and the other was Catholic. But this tells me that he rejected God. But later in the same book, he almost contradicts himself. He says, "I frequently look back at my life, searching for that fork in the road, trying to figure out where exactly I went bad, and became a thrill-seeking, pleasure-hungry sensualist, always looking to shock, amuse, terrify, and manipulate, seeking to fill that empty spot in my soul with something new." So his philosophy that he was holding on to, that our body's not a temple, but it's an amusement park, and we just need to have fun and fill our life with pleasure, even he admitted that it wasn't satisfying, and he just had this ravenous hunger to keep filling this with all this pleasure and desire, and it just never satisfied him. In a 2016 interview with Vogue magazine, he said, "Life is complicated. It's filled with nuance. It's unsatisfying." He showed the interview one of his arm tattoos. "It's from the Greek for skeptics," he says. "The translation is, 'I am certain of nothing. I'm not even sure of that. If I believe in anything, it's doubt. The root cause of all life's problems is looking for a simple," and then an expletive that I won't put, "answer." So basically, he was saying that he's not certain of anything, and so all this, for years, he's been putting all this philosophy and telling people that they need to go just enjoy life and all this, but toward the end of his life, he said, "I'm not sure of anything." And what was the result of his rejection of God and living by his own standard of beliefs? He committed suicide in 2018. Pursuing ourselves, pursuing all this pleasure, pursuing everything we desire and want is never going to satisfy. And this is just an example, even though this isn't related to gender, this is an example of a man who gained the whole world, and yet he was empty. We all desire to be something better and greater than we are. We were created for this perfect paradise, but mankind's sin entered God's creation. And then Adam and Eve were evicted from the garden. But why? And I took out a slide. I meant to actually take that one out. But remember, and I think Mom has taught on this before, that God kicked them out of the garden, not because God hated them or wouldn't forgive them or anything like that. He didn't want them to have access to the tree of life in their fallen state. They needed to be redeemed, and they needed to be made alive again because they had died spiritually. Their spirits were dead because of this. Then the Lord God said, "Behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil, and now he might stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever." Therefore, just as though one man, Adam, sin entered into the world, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned. You were born with a desperate need to be redeemed. That's why Jesus gave his life, that you could be redeemed. Therefore, we have been buried with him through baptism into death, so that as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, so we too might walk in newness of life. Before we get saved, we're like the walking dead, walking around like zombies. We're physically walking around, we're physically alive, but dead inside. For if we have become united with him in the likeness of his death, certainly we shall also be in his likeness of his resurrection. Knowing this, that our old self was crucified with him in order that our body of sin might be done away with, so that we would no longer be slaves to sin. for he who has died is freed from sin. And then Paul said, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creature. The old things have passed away. Behold, all things are become new. And so this is my point with transgenders, with people that are searching for these identities. They do have a desire to be something different than what they are. We need to point them to what they really need, this identity that because they do need to be reborn. They do need to be recreated. But it's not in creating this false identity that's just changing the outer body. They need to be regenerated from the inside. For we know that the whole creation groans and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. And not only this, but we ourselves, having the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our body. And we can tell people, one day you will have a brand new body. You will have a perfect body that will have no pain. You won't have any dysphoria with it. You won't be wanting to change it. You will have a perfectly glorified body. But we can only achieve that if we are in Christ. And that will be, of course, once we go to heaven. And then just to remind people, too, I love this verse out of 1 Corinthians. It's actually quoting out of the Old Testament. Things which eye has not seen, and ear has not heard, and which has not even entered into the heart of man, all that God has prepared for those who love him. My life is so much better than it was then, and I just could not even imagine the things that God had for me. So let's remind people that Christ can give you a life that is so much better than the best life that you could even think of, because you cannot even conceive of the good things that God has for you. Jesus did not die to make your life easier, more comfortable, more popular, to make you stronger or prettier. He's not the missing piece in your life. I always hate, I hate this phrase because we hear that a lot in the churches. Jesus is the missing piece in your life, and you need this one little piece, and then you're going to be complete. But Jesus, he wants to make you part of his life. He is the complete body. He wants you to find your identity in him. Because I think what's happened when we try to make Jesus the missing piece in our life, we're still over here living our life. We're still living for our desires. We're living for the world. But no, Paul said or Jesus is everything or he's nothing. He cannot be part of your life. He must be your life. Paul said, for me to live as Christ and to die as gain. Remember that a Pharisee named Nicodemus came to Jesus one night to talk to Jesus and confessed that he knew Jesus had come from God. Jesus answered and said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. We can't hyphenate Jesus. There's a big move right now calling them gay Christians. And there's a conference that's been going on every year now for the last couple of years called Revoice, where they are basically saying that we are born gay and we can't help it and we're going to be celibate, and that's what they're trying to, and there's no hope in that at all. If you want more information on that, listen to Janet Mefford Live from, it was either yesterday or Monday perhaps. She talked a lot about the Revoice conference and what's going on. And this pastor, Greg Johnson, that is just claiming that he is gay and no one's ever going to change him and he can't change, and so he's just going to identify as a gay Christian, and he talks about how much he suffers and all this, but there's no hope in that. It is such a small view of God. God can completely redeem and regenerate. I know so many former LGBT now, but we cannot be gay Christians, trans Christians, drunk Christians, fornicating Christians, any of these things. We don't hyphenate our Christianity. We don't hyphenate Jesus. When we give our life to Christ, he gives us a brand new life. Old things are passed away, and we can't continue to hang on to our old identity. And God made that so clear when I was trying to be a man of God and trying to live as a trans Christian. And this is one of the verses that ultimately led me out of that lifestyle. Then said Jesus unto his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. For what does it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? And the Lord made it very clear, and I thought about if I hang on to this desire, this identity that I want so badly, because as much as I realized that life was fake, I couldn't face the fact that I was a girl. And so I there was so much pain there, but I thought, if I hang on to this, what are the eternal consequences? Will I truly, lose my own soul? Is that worth it? But it was extremely difficult. And let's not be deceived. Paul said, or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor homosexuals, nor thieves, nor the covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. But there's another verse to that. But such were some of you. You were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and in the Spirit of our God. This is a great verse to share with people that are living in those lifestyles if you have an opportunity. There's a guy named Stephen Bennett that this was the verse that ultimately led him out of the lifestyle. A girl had come to his house, knocked on his door. I forgot how he knew her, but said, "Can I talk to you about God, about Jesus and your homosexuality?" And he didn't know the two were related. He was like, "What do you mean?" And so she lovingly shared this verse with him. And he said, "Wait a minute, are you telling me people can change?" So this verse ultimately set him free. And also, I don't know if you remember me talking about the guy Anthony that I was able to lead to the Lord a couple of months ago. This is the verse I shared with him as well. So there's so much power knowing that people can be set free. And just to remind us and I know you probably can't read that, who God says we are. This is one of my favorite. I love Psalm 139, the whole thing, but I'll just read you part of it. For you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all the days written that were ordained for me when as yet there was none of them. And then in Jeremiah 1, verse 5, he said, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations." So God knows us before we were even born. And he has a plan and a purpose for us. And that was one thing I really tried to share at the Pride Festival. And it was amazing to me, some of these kids that have been taught this from such a young age now. There was one girl that was walking around with this flag that was pink on one side and blue on the other with black in the middle. And I hadn't seen that particular flag before. And I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "It stands for gender queer or gender fluid." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" She really couldn't tell me. I mean, it means I'm kind of not really either. And she kind of hemmed and hawed, but she really didn't know what it meant. And so I just began to share with her those couple of verses I just showed you in Psalm 139 and began to tell her, God made you with a plan and a purpose. He made you for his glory. And I can just, see her eyes as she's never heard any of this. And so we just it's loving to share the truth. And there are going to be people that are going to hate us. They're going to reject this message. But Christ told us we would be hated. I think the church has forgotten that Christ said that we would face much tribulation, that we would be hated. And he even says, "Woe unto you when all men love you." But we've got to start sharing the truth. Because I've heard so many stories of people, even in my own life, there were seeds planted along the way. A seed doesn't spring and grow up immediately. So sometimes when we share the truth, we can't judge how successful we were based on the reactions because the seed takes time to grow. And so, for me, there were so many things I heard along the way on radio, through my mom and dad, through various sources, gospel tracts that were left on my car windshield. So you just never know. So just be seeking the Lord on how we can be reaching our community for Christ. I want to show you one last video. This guy has also passed away. But I just really like this guy's testimony. His name was Trace McNutt. He was a former drag queen. Oh. It's not playing. I think I actually have this video, though. Here we go. Let's play it for you.
Got involved in the fetish scene in Atlanta. And just seeping into a deeper, darker place than I ever thought I ever would have gone to. The rejection of other boys my own age, My father being very submissive and weak and really not being a dominant role in my life at all. In fact, I can't even really think of ever even having a conversation with my father. I had no natural healthy bonding with men. And that's what I was listening to this man describe. And a great revelation came upon me that for the first time in my, at this point, I'm probably 35, 36 years old, that I was not born gay.
I didn't realize you couldn't see it.
The Lord spoke it clearly to me that.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't realize y'all couldn't see that. I wonder if I can. Aha. I'm so thankful the Lord didn't ask for perfect vessels. Okay, we'll try this again, because this is a good story.
I got involved in the fetish scene in Atlanta. And just, again, just seeping into a deeper, darker place than I ever thought I ever would have gone to. The rejection of other boys my own age, my father being very submissive and weak and really not being a dominant role in my life at all. In fact, I can't even really think of ever even having a conversation with my father. I had no natural healthy bonding with men. And that's what I was listening to this man describe. And a great revelation came upon me that for the first time in my, at this point, I'm probably 35, 36 years old, that I was not born gay. And I knew this. The Lord spoke it clearly to me that I was not born gay, that there were circumstances that contributed to my homosexuality, and that God did not make me that way. God didn't want me to stay that way. And that at this point, from now on, it was my choice. Was I going to remain a practicing homosexual and this deviant drag queen rock star, or was I going to embrace the truth that he had just shown me?
From as long as I can remember, I've been attracted to men. I've been basically a homosexual. From my earliest childhood memories, my desires have always been towards men. I never understood this. It wasn't until my early teens that I heard about Jesus for the first time. And I surrendered my life in 1984 to Jesus and walked away from the lifestyle that I was so deeply entrenched in. But I walked with the Lord for about a year, and I had an unfortunate encounter with a pastor who made a sexual advance towards me, and I went running back into the arms of the gay community. Not only did I run back into the arms of the gay community, but I became a drag queen. I became a nationally known drag queen who performed all over the country, from LA to New York City, from Florida to Michigan. I was very, very well known, and I was deep, deep in sin. I was seen on MTV and VH1. I was living the life. I had more money and more drugs than you could imagine, but I was empty inside. But yet I knew of Jesus, but yet I chose to do this anyways, until I found out that I had tested to be HIV positive. My parents died. My best friend died of AIDS. I was HIV positive. I was arrested on felony drug charges of cocaine. I had nothing left. I ended up becoming very sick, lost everything I had, and was homeless on the streets of Tampa, Florida. I was diagnosed with a severe form of cancer and was expected to die from the AIDS. When I finally sought God back out, I found God, started attending a great church, but as I got healthier, I spit in God's face again, and I ran back into the gay world and started performing in drag again. It wasn't for about another year until the Lord showed up literally in my room one night. I don't mean physically. His spirit was there, and I knew he was drawing me, and I surrendered that night, and I laid everything down. I laid it all down at the foot of the cross, and I knew it was time. This was my time to surrender and to come back to the Lord. That was 3 years ago. My HIV and AIDS is now undetectable. I'm living a life like I never knew I could live, and I've been completely redeemed and saved by the blood of Jesus. My desires haven't necessarily gone away, but I believe that I have to pick up my cross and follow Christ. And if this is something that I have to lay down for him, after he laid down his life for me, that's the very least I can do. And my strive is to be Christ-like. That's my heart's desire. My name is Trace, and I have a testimony about Jesus, from drag queen to child of the King.
My father, he committed suicide, and so born to a.
We don't have time to show. That was originally a compilation I'd made of several. But I just wanted to hear another testimony of these people that have been totally set free. This was a guy that had everything. He was deep in the lifestyle and just so much sin. And this is another one, David Arthur. This is actually the guy that helped me out of the lifestyle. When I was desperate, I prayed and I begged and I asked God one day to show me someone else that knew how I felt. And this was David Arthur. He helped me out of that lifestyle. And so I just want to remind us that no matter what sin people are in, no matter how deep they're in it, no matter what, like there's even activists that are getting saved. We just never know, and we just need to be praying. I've been praying and praying for the LGBT community, for God to raise up pastors. I've been praying specifically for God to raise up more preachers that will go out and spread the gospel to these communities. Street preachers are popping up all over the country right now. There has been a wave. One guy, the guy that I was just with this last weekend, he was hosting a street preaching training, and 20 guys showed up. And now I've had 2 others contact me just in the last few days, say, how can we go and reach this community? And so God is really beginning to burden people for this community. They desperately need the gospel. And so I just want to, I don't know if all of you know, I talked about it on the little handout that you got, that I've now stepped out into full-time ministry. So I'll have more of an official supporter letter here pretty soon. I've been traveling a lot lately. But I just would ask that if the Lord lays it on your heart, if you want to join me in this ministry, we really want to get the message out. I've listed some of my ministry goals and the things that I'll be doing, some of the events I've been going to and things I have coming up. Please join me in prayer as well. But if the Lord lays it on your heart to become a financial supporter, I'd greatly appreciate it. But also, please share my materials and my books and things. You can share my YouTube videos. Get the word out on social media, not only on what's going on in the culture, but also on what Christ is doing. I'm hearing of so many be set free. So I just want to encourage us all today that no matter what your loved ones are involved in, no matter what sin they're in, they are not beyond God's redemption. In fact, there's one girl that I'll just share that recently, her mother has just devastated. Her entire family's rejected her because she won't affirm her daughter's identity as a man, and literally her entire family hates her right now. And I was trying to encourage her the other day, and I asked the Lord what I should pray for her, and I was asking the Lord for a specific verse, and he led me to a verse in Isaiah that says that his arm is not too short to save. You know, no matter where they're at, no matter what they're in, they can be saved and they can be redeemed. So I just thank you all today for listening and for being here.